Foreign judges should not be able to tell us that we cannot deport foreign criminals. This is Dorian Puka. He's Albanian, he's 28 years old. He's been jailed for burglary and deported twice. Well, he sneaked back into Britain, and here's the latest. Yeah, that's right. He posted a video of himself driving a £300,000 Ferrari. We are powerless to deport him until his latest asylum claim has been fully heard. And even if we do decide to, then he will just go to the ECHR and they'll probably let him stay. Like this other Albanian criminal, Ardit Binaj, who also liked to rob people. Binaj entered the UK illegally in a lorry in 2014 before being arrested the next year for burglary. He was jailed for 30 months in 2016 for the break-in, alongside a 6-month prison term for another burglary and 18 weeks for a separate theft. He was freed 6 months later and deported. Within months, he broke back into Britain. He found himself a nice Lithuanian girlfriend who he had a child with. He then used the ECHR's right to a family life to be allowed to stay in Britain. The whole thing is a complete joke, isn't it? But they're not the only ones. We've had rapists, murderers and terrorists, like Wabi Mohammed, who plotted the infamous July 2005 failed bombings in London, which came weeks after the 7/7 bombings, which killed 52 people. The Somalian national was imprisoned for 17 years before seeing his sentence reduced to 13 on appeal. He cannot be deported after arguing that he may face inhumane treatment in his native country, which would breach Article 3 of the ECHR and, of course, would be a massive shame. Ismail Abdurrahman, one of Mohammed's accomplices, was jailed for 10 years in 2008, which was reduced to 8 on appeal. However, his lawyers successfully argued that if he was sent back to Somalia, his human rights may be breached as well. The government were forced to actually pay him 13 grand after the ECHR found that Scotland Yard failed to ensure his rights to a fair trial and legal assistance. In August 2021, he was jailed again, this time for 8 months for breaching his bail conditions. Look, some of these foreign judges are from places like Bosnia, Monaco, Armenia, Andorra, Slovenia and San Marino. San Marino has a population of 33,660. So you could fit their entire population into Brighton and Hove Albion's football stadium. People always say, well, only Belarus and Russia aren't in the ECHR. Yeah, well, neither are Canada, Japan and Australia. And they're not exactly despotic regimes, are they? People say, oh, Winston Churchill, he helped create the thing, didn't he? All right, well, Winston Churchill did not help to create it so that Albanian drug lords and Islamist terrorists could be told that they could stay in Britain by a judge from a country that is essentially a hernia on the stomach of Italy. We need to either ignore the ECHR or leave. Let's get the thoughts of my panel. I am joined, as ever, by the columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku. We've also got the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and the journalist Jonathan Liss.
That is so rude to the people of San Marino. I think you should apologise. A hernia. It's a beautiful little country.
I have been.
That was a good quip. It's gorgeous.
It's more of a size reference. Anyway, let's get back on track. So,
size doesn't matter.
I don't know who told you that. All right, OK. We're in the gutter already. Steve, I'm going to just go straight down the line to you and just say, look, what do we do about the amount of Albanian wrong'uns that the ECHR is demanding that we keep in Britain?
Deport first. Appeal later. We have that in legislation. We have that under our immigration laws. So it's not within the wit of man that we have legislation passed by our own parliament that enables us to override the ECHR in these circumstances, for us to be able to say, as the Home Secretary, but it takes a very strong Home Secretary to actually do that. And so if they did, then we'd have Super Sambuca Duka being deported instead of sitting there drinking Sambuca, watching TikTok and driving a £300,000 car. All it comes down to is the political will of this Home Secretary to do the right thing, carry out the legislation, deport first, appeal later, and we have lots of sections to do it. Otherwise, then we go to the nuclear bomb in terms of legislation and leave the ECHR. I've said it for nearly a decade. It would do us a pile of good to do so, and then we could remove all the legislation that is in our own UK law that leads these people to stay.
Look, it's putting us at risk, isn't it? I mean, you see these people.
There'll always be frustrating cases like this that really shouldn't happen, particularly on the scale that they do. I mean, Abdulaziz is one of the first ones that really came into public consciousness. I think the issue here is the complex around it. So the charity industrial complex around this, the human rights lawyers and the judges, and who's funding these institutions and these individuals that are heading up these cases for people like this, a convicted burglar, to argue that he should stay in the UK because he has a
so you'd go after the lawyers?
Well, but this is the thing. It's not just one person. It's not individual cases like this, and they don't just happen. They don't just come out of nowhere. They're part of a system, right, of a charity industrial complex and of these human rights lawyers and all of that choose cases, and they choose to pursue cases that are against the national security interests of the UK. Now, obviously, the argument should be, yes, the people that are meant to enforce our national security interests should deport first and then ask questions later. However, you also have to tackle the system within which these people operate.
It's a good point. It's a great point. So I'll put that to you then, Jonathan. You know, I mean, look, some of the rulings recently by the ECHR raised eyebrows. I mean, I think they backed Greta Thunberg and a load of geriatric Swiss women who said that their lives were being
What
impeded.
did you drink this evening?
No, nothing. Not these days. Remarkably, this is me.
You're on fire.
But over the eco-lunacy, right? So that was seen by many as a kind of oddly political move. So if it could be argued that the ECHR might be a bit political, and then the lawyers who are bringing all of these cases are definitely political, then we do have a problem with our system, don't we? We've got lefties who are making us all more dangerous.
Patrick, just because you disagree with the ruling, it doesn't make it flawed. It doesn't make the court against you or political. It just ruled against It just ruled in a way that you didn't like. The problem with human rights, Patrick, is that they apply to everybody, not just the people that we like. I don't much like the cut of that guy's jib either, I can tell you. But actually, you conflated two separate cases there. So this guy, who's claiming asylum, one would expect that claim for asylum would be rejected and there's nothing. He'd have to have a very good reason. He'd have to have something like the right to family life, and that's where it comes to the other case, which you just mentioned.
Hold on.
That's the thing.
This argument that human rights are equally applied is not true.
You have certain human rights in this country, whether we like it or not. And even if you were to leave the ECHR, a British Bill of Rights that replaced it would also, I guarantee you, establish the right to family life as well. It's not his child's fault, is it?
But Jonathan, isn't the point that Patrick and others, and those like myself, who say, here you're saying he has human rights, but what about the rights of the victims? What about the rights of the state?
Well, that's what I was going to say.
And isn't the ECHR the fact that it's no longer balancing those two equally? What it's saying is, here we have a de facto criminal who sneaked in, which is illegal in its own right. He then claims Article 8, I've got a family, I can stay. So is there not a case somewhere along the lines legally that says a nation state should be able to balance those rights and say that is not a human right that we recognise for a criminal who's a non-UK citizen? I
don't see how it benefits the victim for a child to be denied his father, for example.
No one is denying the child. The child can go to where the father is. Hold on, but this idea of the human rights being applied equally and consistently and all that's a fallacy, right? Human rights means different things in other parts of the world. And I think when you have a situation where you have a cabal of human rights lawyers and judges that are basically deciding what human rights are and who gets the benefit of them and whose human rights trumps others, because now basically what happened is this person's human rights trumps the human rights to security of the British nationals. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's where the problem is. We're under this impression that when you operate under the rubric of human rights, everything is settled. But it's actually it's a creation of this elite group of legal practitioners that actually has real world consequences, but is not consistently applied.
And I have one other problem with it as well.
Change that.
It's not just that those lawyers who are specialising in this area. The area is that it's about the academics. We have academics that are sitting as judges on the ECHR.
Oh, gosh.
And you don't have to be a proper judge as we'd understand it, someone who sits in a criminal case.
What you're telling me is that chap from San Marino...
He could be just a lecturer.
Might not even be a judge.
No, he's just a lecturer because it's deemed a lawyer.
Is there a University of San Marino? Anyway,
and if he's appointed to that role as a lecturer, and I do have problems with lecturers being able to rule on judgments in cases because they have no real-life experience in the court of real life.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I'm sorry, I don't believe that the academia left-wing bias stops when you hit the channel. I imagine that there is quite a lot of that going around. Look, Jonathan, when I look around now, you're shaking your head about it.
Because it's completely not true that
how can
academia
it be completely not true? It's like
There are
seriously.
so many right-wing academics.
Tofu-eating, Guardian-reading woker ass.
You're trying to wind me up.
Okay, that's a complete fallacy. I'm sorry. Like this idea that there's a balance. You realise that the academia is a self-perpetuating industry. If you are a right-wing academic, it's hard to get funding. It's hard to even get hired.
It's hard to get a job.
Exactly. This idea that there's some sort of neutrality and it's just people on the right that are whinging is not actually
Talk about human rights. Talk about human rights.
I haven't invested in it. Come on.
Talk about human rights. You know, I would argue that it's a pensioner's human right, someone who's been in our armed forces, to be able to turn their heating on this winter without worrying about whether or not they are going to have to, you know, go without food for a week. But we do have our chap from Albania there, who's a criminal, and his human right to razz a Ferrari around the streets of Britain appears to trump that, does it?
Well, I don't think anyone's arguing that it's a human right to drive a Ferrari. But it's not a crime to drive a Ferrari unless he's stolen it. So that's...
But it's a human right to be protected.
Do you wonder where he got the money?
It's a human right to be protected from illegal migrants entering this country and burglaring your house. It's a human right to have yourself protected from a foreign national coming over here and raping your daughter. It's a human right not to have yourself abused or beaten on the streets of your own country because the ECHR protects you. Now, if I'm going to lose my rag about this, it's because I'm angry about foreign nationals being able to come here and our incompetent Home Secretaries from being able to deport them when they commit crimes like this. The people of this country should be protected. They're not at the moment, and they're being aided and abetted by a common law that's accepted the European Court of Human Rights.
Why should we be more angry about foreigners committing crimes than anyone else committing crimes?
Because we shouldn't be importing more problems.
Because you're importing
it. You could say it's a human right to be protected from any crime. I would say yes. It doesn't
Absolutely.
Actually, why does it matter so much? Obviously, we need to stop dangerous people being on our streets. I'm just more interested in that than where they come from.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, go and ask some of the people who've suffered at the hands of some of these people.
The majority of criminals in this country are not
I'll tell you why.
immigrants.
It's avoidable. That's the problem. Why should we be more incensed? Because it's avoidable to not have people, foreign nationals, committing crimes in this country. We don't have to import those problems. That's the difference.
We should do our best not to as well.
Wonderful people. We're going to have to crack on.